Warm greetings, welcome in. If you're trying to drift off to sleep, relaxing, or simply curious by the strange paranormal occurrences of our world, you've made it to the right place. Breathe easy and relax your body. This time is your time and yours alone. Let the soft noises and worries of the world drift out of reach as you feel your body slowly sink into a deep, deep drowsiness. Today, I will be explaining the history of the ancient Ram Inn and its connection to the paranormal, otherworldly, and bothersome. However, before we delve into the inn's haunting past, I would love to know what time it is for you and where you're tuning in from. It is always so interesting to see who's joining from all around the world. Now, dim the lights, sink deeper and deeper into comfort, and join me as I ramble on about this troubling, haunted history. Nestled in the quiet market town of Watton-under-Edge in Gloucestershire, England, there stands a structure built not just with timber and stone, but layered over time with centuries of shadowed energy. The ancient Ram Inn, built in the year 1145, rests at the foot of a sloping hill where the lines of old-world belief and unseen energy quietly intersect. To the average passerby, it may seem like an aged cottage or an old countryside pub long forgotten. But to those who have stepped across its creaking threshold, it carries a different weight entirely. The inn was originally constructed to house workers who built the nearby Church of St. Mary. The land beneath it, however, holds a much older story. Centuries before the church or the inn were imagined, this land is said to have been a site of pagan worship. It rests on what are called ley lines, subtle pathways of geomagnetic pull believed by some to channel spiritual energy. These lines are often said to connect ancient religious sites, such as Stonehenge and the pyramids of Egypt. Whether the lines themselves hold power, or whether belief in them gives rise to strange experience, remains something quietly debated. What is less debated, at least among those who have stayed the night, is that the house seems alive with memories. In the earliest years of its standing, the inn was linked to the church and perhaps held a certain sacredness. But that quickly faded. The building soon passed into private ownership, shifted to an inn, and then eventually a family home. Over the years, the structure remained largely unchanged. Low wooden beams, narrow passageways, and slanting walls make the house feel as if it is leaning in on itself. The scent of time lingers there. The wood is dark and splintered. The air tastes of age. Many believe that one of the strongest sources of its unsettling presence comes from a story that is as disturbing as it is simple. Beneath a section of floorboards near the main staircase, the remains of a young child were discovered. With the skeleton was a small blade. Some believe this was a ritual sacrifice performed during a time when pagan rites mingled with growing Christian customs. Others believe it was simply murder buried over by time. Whichever truth lingers below the timber, the sound of soft, unsteady crying has been reported near that stairwell. Visitors lying still at night have claimed to hear it. Not once, not twice, but again and again, faint and low, almost like something moving through an endless loop of memory. One of the most frequently spoken of places in the house is a room known only as the witch's room. It's believed to have been the place where a woman accused of witchcraft once hid during the English witch trials. She was discovered, dragged from the home, and burned nearby. Her story ends in flame, but her presence, many say, never left. The room carries an unnatural chill. No matter the time of year or heat from the fireplace, guests say that entering that space feels like stepping into a place the world forgot. People have reported heavy breathing in the room, though no one is near them. Others have heard rustling in the corners of the floor where nothing rests. Some claim the witch herself stands at the edge of the bed, unmoving, cloaked in heavy folds, watching without sound. A few have awoken to her face, just above theirs, hollow and waiting. Then, just as softly, she is gone. The bishop's room is another area that holds a strange reference. Over the years, countless guests have tried to spend the night there. Many have left before morning. The room is one of the largest in the inn. It was once reserved for traveling clergy, though it holds no comfort now. The stories tied to this room are wide and varied, yet all circle around a shared sense of being watched. Some have described a monk-like figure who walks the room from corner to corner, neither glancing up nor acknowledging the living. Others see only the aftermath of furniture that moves in the night, windows that fog and then clear without reason, and an air that grows suddenly heavy around 2 or 3 in the morning. A former visitor once claimed that a hand reached out from the wardrobe and touched the side of their head. The door had not opened. The hand was not warm. When they turned, they were alone. And yet, the scent of dried earth hung in the air. Perhaps most unnerving of all the stories are those tied to something darker. Something that doesn't take a human form. A presence some have named, though not lightly. The incubus. When John Humphreys, a former owner of the home, first moved in, he slept in the building alone. On his very first night, he said that something pinned him down in his bed. He could not breathe. He could not speak. The sensation only passed after what felt like an hour. He later stated that it was not sleep paralysis. He had experienced that before. This, he said, was something else entirely. Over the years, the presence returned. Guests described similar attacks. They felt the weight of something pressing into their chest. They could hear breathing inches from their ear, but no one else was in the room. Some even described a low, almost pulsing growl beneath the floor. The floorboards themselves tell stories too. At night, when the house is otherwise quiet, footsteps echo down the hallway even when no one is walking. The pattern is slow, unrushed, as if something is pacing. A few claim they've opened the door to see what's moving, only to find no one. Then, just before shutting it again, they hear the footsteps now behind them, returning down the stairs. Cold spots are another constant. The rooms grow cold with no pattern, and not just slightly. The air feels sharp, as if something older than time has taken in a long breath. Guests describe wrapping themselves in heavy bedding and still shivering. One woman brought a portable space heater to sleep beside her bed. It flickered off on its own even when tested and reset 3 times. She left the next morning and never returned. In a room near the back of the home, there's a long disputed story about a shadowy feline. Not quite a cat, not quite a dog, but something that moves along the edges of vision. Guests have reported seeing glowing eyes in the middle of the night, red and pulsing, peering from behind furniture or just outside the doorway. A few have even described it climbing onto the bed, its shape low to the mattress but impossibly long, before vanishing in a blink. There are whispers of other things too. Whispering itself. Faint voices heard in the quietest hours. Some in English, some in older tongues. A past visitor from Devon claimed that while standing near the kitchen door, she heard a voice speaking from just behind her shoulder. She turned quickly, expecting a fellow guest. Instead, she found only still air and a small trail of salt across the stone floor. She had not spilled any, and no one else was awake. The hallway outside the main parlor has an unusual feel. The boards creak in strange patterns. People walking together find their footsteps out of sync. It is said that the hallway sometimes extends itself. What should be 5 paces becomes 10. A trick of the mind perhaps, but enough to make more than one guest stop and stare, unsure how they arrived at the end. Over the years, the ancient Ram Inn has become a quiet beacon for those seeking proof of the unseen. Paranormal investigators, psychics, historians, and curious travelers have all passed through its slanted doorway. Some have stayed for hours. Others couldn't last more than a few minutes. What they have taken away with them isn't always measurable, but it often lingers. In memory, in dream, and sometimes in recordings. Many teams have attempted to capture evidence of the house's strange nature. Digital audio recorders placed near the old chimney have picked up what some call electronic voice phenomena. Short, breathy phrases. Some clear, others tangled in distortion. One team from the mid-2000s recorded what sounded like the word leave, whispered 3 times in a row despite no one being in the room at the time. The pitch of the voice was low, gravelly, measured. In the kitchen, beneath the hanging beams, objects shift with no known cause. Cups left on the table in the evening are sometimes found on the floor by morning, but never shattered, just resting there as if placed deliberately. Wooden chairs have moved without touch, caught on film sliding softly across the stone. It is never loud, just subtle, like someone very gently adjusting the room to their liking. The attic is rarely entered. Most visitors don't even realize it's there. But those who climb the narrow stairs to the top floor describe a strange sensation before even crossing the threshold. The doorway is small, only a few feet high, forcing most people to duck as they pass through. Once inside, the air feels dense, and not just thick. It presses inward as if the attic is its own pocket of the house. An investigator once brought a handheld motion detector into the space. It flashed green, then red again. No one moved. The batteries drained almost instantly, and the room fell completely silent. Not even the sound of wind brushing the roof remained. In the bishop's room, the fireplace sometimes gives off more than warmth. Some guests have seen the form of a figure standing just within the hearth. Not on the floor, not beside the flames, but inside the stone cavity, standing upright, facing outward. The figure does not move. It does not flicker with the fire. Its edges remain still, like soot burned into the memory of the room. A man from Surrey once stayed the night with his daughter. They brought a camera to document the room for a school project on folklore. After taking a picture of the fireplace, they found a shape they could not explain. A full outline of a man with a tall, domed hat, arms at his side, face washed in shadow. When they returned home, the photo was no longer on the camera. All other photos remained. Just that one had vanished. Many guests have spoken of hands. Not full apparitions. Just hands. Cold, unseen, and slow-moving. One man staying in the red room said he felt a grip around his ankle as he drifted to sleep. Thinking it was a cramp, he sat up and reached down. But what he touched wasn't himself. It was soft, damp, and then gone. He spent the rest of the night in his car. In more than one instance, guests have left notes behind in the visitor log. The current owner, who has preserved much of the house exactly as it was decades ago, keeps a box of these entries. Most are short. Some are scrawled in haste. One reads simply, "Didn't make it through the night. Felt like someone was watching from the ceiling." Another, more detailed, says, "3 knocks on the wall. Then again. Same time apart. Couldn't breathe." The knocks are common, often in threes. Always at night. Some believe this is symbolic. Others say it's just the house settling. But even those who believe in wood and wind have trouble explaining why the knocking moves, sometimes from wall to wall, following the person inside the room. Lights are dim within the house. Not by fault, but by design. Candles and warm bulbs maintain a soft glow throughout the lower floor. But even then, the shadows feel deeper than expected. Several people have commented that light doesn't quite reach the corners, especially in the hallway. The hallway between the main bedroom and the front sitting area feels longer at night. Some have taken twice the usual number of steps to cross it. Others have sworn they could see the faint outline of someone standing at the other end, just beyond the final sconce. When they blinked, it was gone. There are reports of something moving outside as well. While the inside of the house holds most of the accounts, a handful of stories reference movement in the yard, especially near the fence that borders the church grounds. A woman walking past on her way home from a nearby shop once stopped in front of the inn. She glanced at one of the windows, then froze. She described seeing an impossibly long face, stretched in shape, watching her with an expression that wasn't angry or sad, but expectant. She said she walked faster after that, but could feel the weight of that gaze all the way to her front door. The inn's owner, John Humphreys, lived in the house for decades. He never renovated, never modernized. He believed the house held things that were meant to be respected, not erased. He once told a local paper that he had been thrown from his bed more than once. On one occasion, he woke to the sound of dragging, heavy, slow, and wet. When he checked the hallway, nothing was there. But he noticed a smear along the floorboards that hadn't been there the night before. He cleaned it, but it returned the following week. Always the same spot. In another case, a pair of guests brought a small device meant to pick up energy readings. They walked room to room, asking simple questions aloud. Most of the time, the device remained quiet. But when they entered the small back bedroom, a voice came through. Clear and short. It said, "Stay." They paused, asked who it was. Nothing more came. But when they stepped back into the hallway, the word returned again. "Stay." As if the house itself wasn't ready for them to leave. There are stranger tales too, involving mirrors. In one case, a man shaving early in the morning saw someone pass behind him in the glass. Not directly, only in the reflection. He turned quickly. The hallway behind him was still. When he turned back to the mirror, the glass had fogged slightly. He hadn't used hot water. Some guests have found marks on their skin, light scratches, sometimes 3 in a row. One woman reported waking up with a ring of small bruises around her wrist as if someone had held her there. She traveled alone. Children are often more attuned to the quiet oddities of the home. Families that have brought young ones to the inn, often for historical curiosity, have shared unusual comments. A boy once pointed to the ceiling and asked his mother who was crawling up there. She said no one was. He replied, "Yes, there is." He was looking at the far end of the bishop's room. In a quiet cupboard near the stairs, several old dolls remain. No one is quite sure how long they've been there. Some claim they came with the house. Others say previous owners added them over the years. Visitors say the dolls move. Nothing dramatic, but in pictures taken hours apart, the angle of a head or the tilt of a limb has changed. When staff attempt to explain the changes, they often find themselves at a loss. The ancient Ram Inn does not advertise itself in bright letters. It does not call out for visitors in the way other haunted locations often do. It simply exists, like a breath that never fully exhales. And perhaps that is part of what makes its presence so long-lasting. It does not need to reach out. People are drawn to it on their own, through whispers and half-remembered stories, through strange little articles found late at night, through the need to know what lies just beyond the veil of normal things. Over the past several decades, many of the stories surrounding the inn have taken on a particular rhythm. They don't always shock. They rarely start with a scream or end in panic. Instead, they build, slowly, gently, a sense of presence, a change in temperature, a glance toward a corner you didn't mean to notice, is what people often refer to as the feeling of being watched, not followed, not hunted, just watched, quietly, thoughtfully, without sound. This feeling seems to be strongest in the area just beneath the main staircase. It is the place where, as mentioned earlier, the bones of a child were found, along with a blade. Most who linger there even without knowing that detail, described the same sensations. A weight in the chest, a slight tremor in the hands. One man said it felt like standing in water up to your knees, even though he was dry. A visiting historian once sat in that corner with a small journal, sketching the wooden trim. After 20 minutes, she said she felt something press against her back. Not painful, just cold. When she turned, the air behind her was still, but her notebook had fallen flat onto the floor, as if nudged. The child's presence, if that's what it is, has become one of the inn's more documented energies. Several guests have heard what sounds like soft footsteps, not in boots or shoes, but in bare feet, light, shuffling, like a child walking too slowly across old stone. Some say they have heard faint giggling, not playful but high and hollow. Others have woken to the sound of breathing at the edge of their bed, very small, very close. When they reach out, the room is empty. It is not uncommon for guests to bring items meant to welcome or acknowledge the spirits. Small gifts, candles, coins. One couple left a carved wooden toy near the fireplace in the bishop's room. When they returned the next morning, the toy had moved 5 feet to the left. They assumed someone had touched it, but their room had been locked all night. The next evening, they placed it back near the hearth. It moved again and again, but always within a few feet of the same location, as if someone invisible had a pattern in mind. There is a growing number of stories that mention a tall, narrow figure. Not quite like the monk seen by others, this one is said to stand in silence at the edge of certain rooms. Not inside the doorway, but just outside it. Guests say they often feel him before they see him. A slight drop in air pressure, a coolness along the shoulder. Then, only when they turn their head, there he is, still, too tall for the room, with features they cannot recall later, as if the face had been forgotten the moment it was seen. A psychic who visited in the early 2010s described this figure as a watcher, not necessarily malicious, but not passive either. Her notes from the visit described the figure as one who keeps track of all things living and does not forget the face of those who enter. She did not return. Another repeated story, though less common, involves the sound of dragging, as if something heavy is being pulled across wood or stone. Sometimes it happens upstairs, sometimes below. The sound is slow and steady. A few visitors have described it as the sound of something wet being hauled. One team of investigators reported hearing the sound move from one end of the house to the other over a span of several minutes. But nothing was found. The furniture was untouched. The doors had not moved. And yet the noise had been recorded on 3 separate microphones. A particularly curious encounter comes from a family that stayed in the inn one spring evening. Their daughter, 8 years old, had wandered into the hallway by herself while her parents were in the sitting room. She returned a few minutes later and said she had met the quiet lady. When asked what she looked like, she said she had long arms and no mouth. The parents thought this was imagination until their daughter refused to sleep unless the curtains were closed tight. She said the lady watched her from the trees. Outside, the property is bordered by wild hedges and a line of old trees that lean inward as if huddling together. Some visitors have claimed to see shapes there. Then, motionless, barely separate from the bark itself. A man walking his dog past the property around dusk said he saw someone in a wedding dress standing still behind the fence. When he turned back, they were gone. The ghost bride is one of the more peculiar sightings tied to the house. Often seen only at a distance, she has been described as swaying in place, always wearing white, always facing away. No one has ever seen her face, but they say her dress is torn near the bottom, and the air around her feels still, even when the wind moves the trees. A pair of travelers from Yorkshire once camped in their van on the lane nearby. They said they woke at 3:17 in the morning to the sound of tapping on the window. Not knocking, just tapping. When they looked, no one was there, but in the condensation was a faint handprint, smaller than theirs, with too many fingers. Inside, time behaves strangely for some. A woman meditating in the back room lost track of several hours. She had intended to sit for no more than 20 minutes. Her recording device said she had been there for 3 hours. She remembered nothing except the sound of deep humming. Steady, distant, like something behind the walls. She left without finishing her stay. Then there are the dreams. Many guests who have stayed overnight describe vivid, heavy dreams. Not nightmares, but not peaceful either. Dreams of walking through unfamiliar halls, of being surrounded by walls that curve slightly, with no doors or windows. Some wake up exactly 3 times in one night. Some write down their dreams in the visitor log, only to come back years later and find similar dreams recorded by others in the same room. The owner of the inn has described one recurring event that even he cannot explain. Once every few months, a soft knocking comes from beneath the floor near the kitchen. Always after midnight, always 3 slow knocks, then silence. He has removed the floorboards, looked beneath, found nothing, but it continues. He has stopped trying to answer it. Despite a great number of paranormal stories, there are those who believe the tales can be explained. A few point to the uneven floors and twisted beams. They say the air feels wrong because the house itself is crooked. They say the sounds are structural, with groaning, nails shifting, old pipes straining. But even some skeptics admit that not every story is so easily placed into neat boxes. One former builder who worked on minor repairs said he heard the front door open and close 3 times in a row. He thought someone had come to check on the work, but no one was there. The door was still locked from the inside. Another man who visited out of curiosity, entirely unconvinced of ghosts, said he walked from one room to the next and forgot what day it was. Not in a moment of distraction. He fully believed it was still Thursday even though it was Sunday. He left confused, shaken by something that made him feel like time itself had gently slipped. Many of the stories that come from the house are quiet in nature. They don't always involve full figures or long conversations. Often it's a flicker in the mirror, a thud below the floor, the sensation of breath on the back of the neck. But sometimes the house makes itself known more directly. In one case, a woman who stayed in the witch's room reported waking in the early morning hours to see her suitcase halfway across the floor. Not just moved slightly, dragged in a line. She thought it had rolled, but it was standing upright with the handle extended as if someone had tried to take it with them. Her room had remained locked from the inside. She left within the hour. Another visitor described a strange episode where the walls seemed to press inward. He said the corners of the room felt closer than before, as if the entire space had shrunk. He stood still, thinking he might be dizzy, but his partner saw it too. The two of them left and measured the room later. It had not changed, but the memory of those sloping walls stayed with them. Photographs taken inside the inn continue to raise questions. Many show orbs of light, small and round, glowing in corners where no sunlight reaches. Some show figures in the background, often in motion, sometimes behind glass. One guest took a picture of the upstairs hallway and later noticed a pale face near the floorboards, eyes open, not looking at the camera, just watching the wall. The original file remains on her phone, though she no longer shows it. Even those who live nearby tend to leave the inn undisturbed. A few local children have told stories of seeing someone in the upstairs window late at night, despite the fact that no guests were staying. A delivery driver once said he heard whispering when he left a parcel at the back entrance. He assumed someone had left a television on, but there was no power running in the house at the time. Some stories reach farther back in time. Oral tales passed down. A former pub regular claimed he saw a woman descend the stairs with no sound. Not a creak, not a tap. She looked real, not translucent. She walked across the room, her head turned away, and disappeared at the far wall without ever turning to face him. There are tales of flickering candlelight on nights when no one was home, of curtains blowing inward while the windows remained shut, of voices singing, humming, always just at the edge of what the ear can catch. The inn seems to hold on to its visitors, not in a way that traps, but in a way that follows. Several people report having dreams long after leaving, dreams of standing in the hall, of walking up the narrow stairs, of opening doors they don't remember closing. One man said he dreamed of the bishop's room for 13 nights straight. Always the same room, always the same silence. He had only visited once over a decade ago. There is no marketing team behind the ancient Ram Inn. It exists without needing to convince anyone, and yet it draws people in. Paranormal investigators, writers, curious travelers, people who don't believe, people who want to believe. They come one by one and they leave changed in quiet ways. The house remains much as it always has. Wooden beams dark with age, thick stone walls that curve in strange places, windows that feel just a little too small, light that doesn't quite reach the corners, a scent that lives between dust and damp. The furniture is old, the floor is uneven, the ceiling low, but more than that, the space holds a certain pulse, as if it remembers, as if each visitor leaves something behind. A breath, a glance, a moment of fear. Those who've spent a full night often say the same thing when they leave. They don't always know what they saw or what they heard, but they remember how they felt. A heaviness in the air, a coolness that wasn't cold, a sense that something was just about to happen but never quite did. And so the ancient Ram Inn remains, not loud, not flashy, just quietly, solidly present. A place where the past never quite fades, where footsteps echo even when no one walks, where names are whispered and never written down, where light flickers and no one checks the bulb. It is a place that does not forget, and perhaps that is the truest haunting of all.